At its peak, Rome ruled over 70 million people. It had the most powerful army the ancient world had ever seen. It had roads that stretched across continents, laws that shaped civilizations, and an empire so vast that people genuinely believed it would last forever. And then, it didn't. Not in a single battle. Not in a single moment. But slowly, painfully, and almost invisibly the greatest empire in human history came apart at the seams. And the most terrifying part? The Romans saw it happening. They wrote about it. They debated it. And they still couldn't stop it. Welcome to Epoch Stories, where history isn't just a list of dates and names. It's a living, breathing story. If you're new here, you're in for something different. And if you've been here before, you already know what we do. Let's get into it. So what actually brought Rome down? Was it the barbarian invasions everyone talks about? Was it moral decay? Economic collapse? Military failure? The truth is it was all of those things. But not in the way most people think. Because Rome didn't fall from the outside. It collapsed from within. And by the time the walls were breached, the empire had already been dying for over 2 centuries. This is the story of how the most powerful civilization in human history destroyed itself and what it means for us today. Let's go back to around 180 AD. Rome is at the height of its glory. The streets of the capital are filled with merchants, soldiers, senators, and citizens from every corner of the known world. The Colosseum roars. The aqueducts flow. The legions hold the borders with an iron grip. But behind all that power and beauty, something is quietly breaking. The Emperor Marcus Aurelius has just died. And with him, something shifts. His son Commodus takes the throne, and almost immediately, the cracks begin to show. Commodus was vain, unstable, and more interested in playing gladiator in the arena than governing one of the most complex empires the world had ever seen. He neglected the military. He drained the treasury. He ruled through fear and paranoia. He was eventually strangled in his bath by his own wrestling partner. But here's the thing: Commodus wasn't the cause of Rome's fall. He was just the first sign that the system was starting to break down. Because after his death, Rome entered a period so chaotic it became known as the Year of the 5 Emperors. 5 men claiming the throne. In a single year. Each one backed by a different faction of the military. Each one willing to burn everything down just to sit on top of the ash. And that pattern: soldiers choosing emperors, emperors buying loyalty, loyalty lasting only as long as the money did. That pattern never really stopped. By the 200s AD, Rome was caught in what historians call the crisis of the 3rd century. In just 50 years, over 20 men claimed the title of emperor. Most of them died violently. The borders were under constant attack. Trade routes collapsed. Cities that had once thrived began to empty out. Farmers abandoned their land. The middle class, the backbone of Roman society, began to disappear. And then came something no army could fight. A plague. Known today as the Plague of Cyprian, disease swept through the empire like nothing anyone had ever seen. At its worst, it was killing up to 5,000 people a day in the city of Rome alone. Soldiers died before they could reach the battlefield. Farmers died before they could harvest their crops. Tax collectors died before they could collect taxes. Rome was bleeding out, and the wound wasn't from a sword. Now here's where it gets really interesting, and this is the part most history books skip over. To fight the constant wars on its borders, Rome needed soldiers. But Roman citizens were dying. So the empire started doing something that would have been unthinkable just a generation earlier. They began recruiting barbarians. Germanic warriors, Goths, Huns. Entire tribes were brought inside the empire and handed Roman weapons, Roman armor, and Roman pay. At first, it worked. The borders held. The empire survived. But think about what was actually happening. The very people Rome had spent centuries trying to keep out were now the ones defending it. And they brought their own leaders, their own loyalties, their own ambitions. These weren't Romans defending Rome. These were hired soldiers defending a paycheck. When the money ran out, and it did run out, their loyalty went with it. This is a good moment to pause and ask you something. If you're finding this story as fascinating as I do, go ahead and hit that like button right now. It genuinely helps this channel reach more people who love history told this way. And if you haven't subscribed yet, join the Epoch Stories family. Every week we bring you stories like this one, powerful, real, and told the way they deserve to be told. Now back to Rome. By the late 300s AD, The empire had grown so large and so difficult to manage that Emperor Diocletian made a decision that seemed logical at the time he split it in two. The Western Roman Empire ruled from Rome. The Eastern Roman Empire ruled from a new capital called Constantinople. The idea was to make the empire easier to govern. And for the East, it worked. Constantinople would go on to survive for another 1,000 years as the Byzantine Empire. But for the West, the split was a slow death sentence. Cut off from the wealth and resources of the East, the Western Empire began to shrink. Tax revenue dried up. The military weakened. Governors in distant provinces stopped listening to Rome. Some started acting like independent kings. The idea of one unified Rome, one eternal city at the center of the world was fading. And most people living through it had no idea just how close to the edge they were standing. Then came 410 AD, a date that shook the ancient world to its core. A Visigoth king named Alaric marched his army through the gates of Rome. And for the first time in 800 years, the city of Rome was sacked, burned, looted. The eternal city, the city that had once conquered the known world, was brought to its knees by the very people it had once dismissed as savages. The psychological impact was devastating. Citizens across the empire asked the same question in disbelief. If Rome itself could fall, what was safe? What was permanent? What could be trusted? The answer, it turned out, was nothing. Over the next few decades, the Western Empire didn't so much collapse as it dissolved. Piece by piece, province by province, Britain was abandoned. North Africa was lost to the Vandals. Spain fell. Gaul fractured. The emperors in the West became powerless figureheads, propped up by barbarian generals who held the real power behind the throne. And on September 4th, 476 AD, it was over. A Germanic chieftain named Odoacer walked into the palace in Ravenna and told the last emperor of the Western Roman Empire, a young boy named Romulus Augustulus, barely a teenager, that his services were no longer needed. No great battle. No dramatic last stand. Just a quiet, unceremonious end to 1,000 years of Roman power. Romulus Augustulus was exiled to a castle in southern Italy, and the Western Roman Empire ceased to exist. But here is the question that should stay with you long after this video ends. Did Rome really fall? Or did it slowly become something else? Because the roads Rome built are still used today. The laws Rome wrote became the foundation of modern legal systems. The language Rome spoke evolved into French, Spanish, Italian, and Portuguese. The Christianity that Rome once persecuted became the dominant religion of Western civilization, carried forward largely by the structures Rome itself created. Rome didn't vanish. It transformed. It seeped into everything that came after it. And in many ways, we are still living inside the shadow of an empire that supposedly ended 1,500 years ago. That is the real legacy of Rome. Not just how it fell, but how much of it never really left. So what do you think brought Rome down? Was it the military? The economy? The political chaos? Or something deeper, something almost inevitable about empires that grow too large and live too long? Drop your answer in the comments. I read every single one, and I genuinely want to know what you think. If this story moved you, hit that like button. It takes 1 second and it means the world to this channel. Subscribe to Epoch Stories so you never miss a story like this. Every week, we bring history back to life, not as a lesson, but as an experience. Because the past isn't dead. It's just waiting to be told. See you in the next one.